Hey, welcome everyone to Reader's Advisory Secrets Renovation Edition with Becky Spratford. Becky is a reader's advisor in Illinois, specializing in serving patrons ages 13 and up. She trains library staff all over the world on how to match books with readers through their local public library, and she runs the critically acclaimed RA training blog, RA for All. We're very happy to have Becky with us this morning to share her knowledge. Welcome.
Thank you, Kelly, and thank you, everyone. And thank you, those of you who are live and those of you who will watch this recording later, because I do know that things come up and sometimes you're counting on that recording when you sign up. Today, we are going to talk for about an hour to an hour, a little over an hour, about Reader's Advisory and how it has changed over the years from when I've done it to now and why that's important. I'm also going to make sure I spend some time at the end going over an exercise that all of you can take back to your libraries and do with other staff. So this is sort of a train the trainer type event that I'm looking at it as. And also, you're going to leave today with one tangible thing you can institute immediately to start providing this new renovated version of Reader's Advisory and get the entire library staff and all of your readers involved. And you're not going to have to do much work because I've started it for you. So let's get started. Throughout the time, by the way, I'm going to talk about certain ideas and things we do and encourage you to share in the chat your own experiences. We'll get to it at some point, but the fact that you're all together from one system is such a great opportunity because you are going to be able to share with each other in a way that is not normally as easy to do. So I'm hoping that you brag about what you're doing at your libraries. And when I talk about an example, you give an example that you're doing so that we can all share with each other today. It will become evident why that's important at the end. So if you keep, or not quite the end, but if you keep doing it the whole time, you will feel really good about yourself. So that is my plug to get you to participate. Now, I want to talk before we go on a little bit about my story. So I went to library school at the graduate library school at the turn of the century. And I went into right away to a library as the brand new person to co-create a Reader's Advisory department. And we're talking July of 2000. So at that time, Reader's Advisory was slowly becoming what was considered a professional thing to offer at the library. I'm going to talk to you though about how I feel like that's changed quite a bit. And I was there to start a department and really build a user base on doing, helping readers find books. And it was about, making displays and putting up the new books. We moved the new books into a more high traffic area and just being there to help people and let them know that their leisure needs mattered. It was very transactional based, right? I learned in library school about people, waiting for people to come up to you and asking them, well, what do you like to read? What's the last good book you read? And it was, like I said, about the transactions, very similar to a reference model. So I did that for 15 years along the way, teaching this course at the school where I went, the Dominican University Masters of Library Information Science. And I got to the point in 2015, right about June, July, so exactly 15 years, where I realized I was starting to also do this training part-time. I had been teaching at the library school. I had stopped doing that because that was too much. And this training picked up. I realized this was the time I was seeing shifts in Reader's Advisory. It was getting more popular, more standard, if not its own department, but something that people do at libraries as part of their regular service model. And I was getting a lot more, like I said, training requests. So I decided to switch to doing this full time, along with, if you read my bio, writing a lot of reviews for Booklist and Library Journal and working with novelists. And when I did that, I went and talked, obviously didn't just quit my job out of nowhere. I went and talked to a bunch of people who were my mentors. And I got a lot of this response. And remember, this is 2015. It's hard to think about how we were before 2020 sometimes. 2015, I got a lot of, Becky, I don't think that you're going to be able to make a go of this because we're moving away from books as a library. We're becoming more about our spaces, right? If you remember, if you were in libraries then, this library as the third space, right? The third place in your community. And we're more about getting our maker spaces going and getting people in the building for programming. We're sort of our side hustle now, right? And I was like, well, I'm still gonna do this. And I was steadily building my business. I've been in person to your area at the invitation of TBLC multiple times. I've done training for you. So I was building it, right? And then 2020 hit. And like I said in this tweet, I was just beside myself with people who I could have told you, I told you so to all of them. I didn't want to though, because it was a horrible reason to do it. But my April, May, and June of 2020 I worked nonstop. Why? Because libraries were closed. Libraries were closed, and a lot of them realized that what they needed was to not only up their leisure reading collections, especially digitally, but they needed to up their service to readers. How are we going to help readers? We don't even know. We were just sort of letting them help themselves. And they were desperate, one, for training on how to do it, but also to give their staff something meaningful to do so they could keep paying them. And I'm not exaggerating that I have helped entire library systems. The most notable one was the Des Moines Public Library in Iowa, who have, I think it was like 10 or 12 branches. I helped them start a reader's advisory department, or reader services across all the branches through just virtual trainings. They've even written about it in a book. And they started with the old-fashioned call center, where people could call and talk about what they wanted to read, because people were really hungry to talk to people. So the library pivot back to books, now that we're in 2023, has not gone away. This is what I found fascinating. As our door counts are slowly getting back to normal in most of the country just now, our use of our leisure materials is through the roof across the board. Fiction sales were, going bonkers during the pandemic, but leisure reading in general is still up, especially in some of our most leisure genres, such as romance, mystery, and speculative fiction. So what I'm seeing then is, and e-materials, e-leisure reading materials, whether they're magazines, books, audiobooks, whatever it is, are through the roof. At my small library, we are just outside the city of Chicago, and we have 16,000 people. We hit a high during 2020, and we've hit more highs since. Every month we have more checkouts. People have found the library during the pandemic, and they are staying with us. I thought the attrition rate would be much higher, but what we are seeing across the country is we've brought more people back to the library through leisure reading. So that's why I'm going to really talk to you about this change. It is so important to understand how different Reader's Advisory is right now and how you can provide the service. We really undergone a renovation. Where I talked to you about learning how Reader's Advisory, when I was taught it, was about the transaction, right? Waiting for someone to ask you, giving them a book and giving them an exact match. That is not what Reader's Advisory is about anymore. It is about relationships. It's about creating relationships. And in fact, because it's about creating relationships, it's also not about just the capital L librarians providing the Reader's Advisory experience. I am hoping some of you watching this now live or on the recording work in circulation, for example, because that is the place where the most relationships are built. At my library, even back, when I was there 5 to 10 years ago, 20 years ago at this point, but in that middle portion, we moved our desk to be closer to the entrance and closer to circulation. Why? Because the Reader's Advisory was all happening at the desk, at the circulation desk, because that's where the relationships were built and the conversations happened. And by moving our desk, we became part of those conversations. We didn't butt in, it was all decided to do it together. And we even had some of our Reader's Advisory staff go and do help at circulation when they were busy, but to also take part in some of those conversations. It has evolved to be about talking about books and sharing books, or even just sharing book news or what's going on in the world, what movies are becoming books, and having those conversations back and forth to create relationships. And because books are at the center of what libraries are about, and because we're pivoting back to that, now we are going back into our programming, I know, but we're not going to lose books. All this talk of, people aren't reading anymore is hogwash now. We've kept them. So what are we going to do? We're going to use that as our pivot point to have relationships with our patrons and get them more engaged and happier with our services overall. And that shift in emphasis means we're going to have to renovate a little bit of how we think about what we're doing. I love this picture of this renovation of a kitchen, right? This idea of what you're going to do. When your family changes, when times change, when things are different, you have to change your spaces. Just think about the number of people who are building home offices in their houses, or, you know, when my kids were little, their toys were huge. I had to build areas to store them. And as they got older, everything got smaller. So I could reclaim some of those spaces for all of us, right? Shift in emphasis means a time to renovate. And that's what I'm going to talk to you about today. I'm going to give you 4 easy to replicate secrets, general overarching secrets of how to provide readers advisory today. And I'm going to give you a lot of examples that you can use under those secrets. We're going to talk about the secret, what it means, and I'm going to give you examples. There are tons of links. You can go look at things after. Like I said, we're going to have 2 specific exercises that we're going to talk about. One you're going to take with you and just implement, and one you're going to take with you and work with your staff to help them renovate their readers advisory services. But here's what I'm going to tell you right now. There are many ideas, and I've tried to give you examples from across different types of libraries, especially today because you're coming. I've been down there to train, and I've met many people from your libraries, and each service area is different. So not every idea I give you is going to work for your library. That being said, some of my ideas you might want to tweak, put your own spin on them. And as I'm giving the ideas on those slides, as I said before, but I saw some of you came in late, please share your ideas when we get to those slides about things you already do so that people can connect with each other. And feel free to have a conversation while I'm talking. I know this is being recorded, and if you sort of are focused on that for a few minutes, that's such more of a valuable experience, because my words, you can go back and watch. So please, I really want some interaction if you feel like sharing. But here's my bonus secret, and this is the overarching secret around everything with Reader's Advisory. Reader's Advisory is more, it's not about talking, giving those recommendations to people. It's about listening to people, listening to what they say, because you can't have a conversation that leads to a relationship if you don't listen. So we have to renovate that idea too, right? That at the reference desk, we feel very much like we are there as the expert, and the patrons treat us this way as well, right? That we're going to be asked the question and we're going to look for the answer. But when we are dealing with Reader's Advisory and helping people with their needs, with their wants, not their needs, like we do at the reference desk, when we help them with their wants, we have to listen a lot more. And that's going to be at the heart of everything I talk about. I'm going to talk to you about listening like with your ears, but also listening with ways that we're going to get feedback from patrons, maybe in writing or comments online. Okay, so let's start with the first secret. The first secret is share. I want you all to expand your concept of sharing books in your library. And what I mean by that is when we share books, we think about book talking or, being asked for something, but I'm talking about sharing more than the actual items. We need to talk about having conversations at the library in general about things that are happening in the book world, right? Being aware of what books are becoming movies, or what people are talking about right now, like the Pulitzer Prizes came out and everyone's like, why'd they pick 2 books? They didn't say it was a tie. What's going on? Like, lots of chatter about that, right? Every day there's some new book news and things like that. We're going to talk about how we find some of that. But also this idea that you can just share what you like to read. You can just start a conversation with people by saying, I finished a great book. Do you want to hear about it? Go share with somebody else on staff, right? Talk about what you're reading and what you like. And then ask people to model that and say, what about you? What do you like? We want to normalize this idea of sharing your preferences. Now, this is a huge renovation for those of you who don't understand. And I want to explain. When I was taught Reader's Advisory, the first thing we were told was to forget about everything we read in life, because we should not share anything about our personal preferences and what we enjoy, because it's not about us, it's about the patrons. So we should, definitely not recommend books we liked, or not worry about that and keep it out of our mind and not share that. And that is absolutely not true anymore. The exact opposite needs to happen. We need to find, I'm going to give you examples, but we need to find ways to normalize sharing our preferences. Share some ways you do that at your library if you want. I'm going to give some more examples on the next slide, but one of the most common ways to do that is a staff recommendation shelf, right? Just like a bookstore. That is a way to normalize your sharing your preferences. But what I will argue to you is we can't get people invested in, one, explaining why they like to read something, not what happens. And so one, we understand why we like to read what we read and can share it. But two, get them to share what they want to read if we're not willing to share what we want to read. It's scary to go up to a desk to people you barely know, or to the librarians who, patrons think hold all the knowledge, and start sharing, ask them to start sharing all their deepest, darkest loves of books. It's embarrassing for some people, right? I love horror. I'm fine sharing that. And in fact, the fact that I shared all these super scary books that I liked helped other people not feel so bad about sharing their romances and all the things that they thought we wouldn't put a premium on, but we did. So let's talk about when to share, right? First of all, you need to book talk at every opportunity. And that is a link to an entire program about book talking. And it's not what you think. It is not prepared book talks. Book talking, the way I teach it, also has a huge renovation, right? Book talking, the way I teach it, is about creating conversations at the library. And some of the next few secrets are going to include some of that information. But if you would like to see even more, you can click through and look at those slides, which have a lot of the information explained that I'm going to sort of summarize today. But when do we share? We need to share between staff and with patrons. So when I talk about normalizing your preferences, and this is something all of you can go start doing today, tomorrow, get up and talk about a book. And you're actually going to have an example that you're going to work on. So on the exercise I'm going to give you to take back to your libraries, where you can actually sit and think about what book you want to share and why. But you want to get a book you really love and that you really feel passionate about. And you want to go practice sharing it to another staff member out loud in front of patrons. When we do this and we encourage other staff, we used to do something where we'd say, when somebody just finished a book they loved or wanted to talk about something, between my department, the children's department, and the circulation, we were all sort of in a triangle. Someone would say 5 minutes of talk, and we'd all run over to the desk to hear what they had to say, right? And we would model it. We would just do it, spontaneously. Patrons would come from the stacks to hear it. And we would just share a book we finished that we really liked and talk about why we liked it, maybe why we read it, what about it was so exciting. And then we went on back the rest of our day. I can't stress enough. People say to me all the time, Becky, no one's coming up and asking for books to read. And I'm like, but are you making it clear that you want to talk about books with them? You're like, oh, we haven't asked me what I'm reading. Show people that you want to do this. If your patrons and customers see you talking to another staff member about something you read for fun, or even watched, or a podcast you listen to, something that can be related to the library, and they see you doing that either at your desk or getting up and going to another desk, they will know that you're not only good at it, but you're willing to do it. I am telling you from experience, this works. We made this a priority at our library. We made talking about books at the desk. I have been to other libraries where they say, Becky, I don't want my staff talking at the desk about what they're doing in their free time. And I'm like, if what they're doing in their free time connects to anything that can be checked out of the library, you should encourage it. So again, if you have a library like that, tell them you paid for me to go to this class, right? Well, I think this is included in your membership, but whatever. You sent me to this class, you're paying my time to be here. You should 100% let me try this, because that's what the instructor said. That usually works. Also, my contact information is at the end. Please send people to me who have a problem with this, because here's what happens. And I've seen this happen at my library and at other libraries. When you start doing this, you can encourage your patrons to do this as well. So when my regular patrons, especially those ones that hang out at the desk too long, and you have trouble getting rid of them, would see us doing this, I would say to them, why don't you come back next time? That's so cool. I want to talk about a book. I'm like, well, talk about it now. And then every time you finish one, come back and tell me. It got to the point where I would put books on hold for some of my most regular patrons. And they knew. I'd say, if you get a book that you don't remember, it's because I put it on hold when I ordered it for you, and I'm expecting you to come back and talk to me about it. This invests them in your service so much more. You're asking them to participate in your reader's advisory. It makes them feel like they're part of the community. But here's the kicker, right? And I unlocked this librarian achievement once, and I've heard from other libraries that it's happened. One time a patron was talking to me about a book, a patron that was there all the time, that they had just finished, and she was doing her little 5-minute book talk. And while we were talking, somebody walked behind her, another patron who came all the time, really quickly, like she was in a hurry, heard us talking, stopped. She was in a hurry, remember, spun on her heels, came back, stared at the patron, not me, and started giving read likes to that patron. That is what I'm talking about. When we prioritize sharing, it's contagious. They then had their own conversation without me about what they were reading. This is what we're going for, right? Now, I know that it's hard to get staff to all do this. And I really truly believe my company is called RA for All because I believe because books are our core service, that every single person who works in the library has a part to play in our readers advisory service. Every single person, even those behind the scenes. If you are interested in doing a little bit of training and gamifying book talking at your library, there's a longer post there about how to give people reasons and excuses to come out from behind where they work or to have a break and go get caught book talking. And you can gamify it and give points and create a friendly competition. So look at that if you're interested in upping the game and getting everyone involved. But here's the other thing too. When you start to do this more, you start with books you really like, then you can also share books you haven't read. And that's sort of the next level, right? When you want to talk about books that are popular that you haven't read, or you want to, you want to be good about sharing things that are outside your own personal comfort zone, and you want to be more diverse and inclusive, you can use the words of others to share. Here's another fallacy from when I first took Reader's Advisory to how it's done now. You're supposed to do things from your knowledge. No, you are not. Just like reference, we don't know the answer to every question, we look it up. We're going to talk about using resources in a little bit, but you can use the words of others. People, your readers, don't want to know. The other question I get is, Becky, if you're suggesting a book and you haven't read it, should you lie and say you've read it? Absolutely not. Here's the thing you don't realize. Your patrons don't care if you've read the book when they ask that. They're asking that question because they want to know somebody read the book and somebody enjoyed it. And therefore, you can just say, well, I haven't read it, but, and you can say, this review and book list said this, or this person on Goodreads loved it. This person thought it was meh. Let's compare the two and we'll get a better sense of the book. This is way more useful than your personal opinion or whether or not you read it. Now, if you read it, share your opinion, but also use the words of others. The words of others are just as good. And that means you can talk about anything because quite honestly, the number of books you read doesn't matter at all. Sorry for those of you who keep track. In fact, some of the best readers advisors I know right now are people that really still don't have much time to read and don't get through a lot of books. How do they know about so much? They use the words of others to help. So let's talk about what I share that is coming up next. How do we share? How do I just start sharing books? I really talk a lot about conversation starters. And conversation starters are all about creating relationships and not tallying transactions. Because conversation starters, rather than an item, right? Rather than waiting for someone to come and ask me for a book, having ways to start conversations. And we're going to talk about all the different ways you can start conversations. And I'm going to even give you conversation starters to take to your library to start using today. It's about that dialogue, right? When you do a conversation. If we're really going to double down on this idea that we're creating relationships and we're not worried about the transactions, because let me tell you, when you create relationships, those transactions come. Numbers go up. People are willing to take more books. They're willing to come back more often. And again, I'm going to give you lots of ways how that happens. But how do we start that? We think about bringing in conversation starters and not items. So we want to talk about books, book news. We want to talk about natural language questions, which I'm going to give you some in a few minutes. But when we have a conversation, we're focusing on the why someone would read the book, not what happens. And that again goes back to the last slide, right? And share any conversation starters you use in the chat or anything you've done that works with things I've talked about. Why not what? When we talk about why someone would like a book and not what happens, we can use the words of others. We don't want to spend time worrying about what happens. Let people figure that out when they read the book. But that why, those appeal factors, that the things you can find on novelists listed as appeal factors, the things people like me write about in the reviews, why someone would like this book. I just turned in a star review for the, it's coming out in a few months. Josh Mallerman has Been a Black Yarn, and it is 5 novella collection. And I cannot tell you how it's amazing. And I am tough on him. I do not give him a star for every book. The first 3 novellas are among the 3 best novellas I've read in a really long time. That's how good this book is. But when I was writing my review that I turned in yesterday, I gave a little synopsis of each of the novellas since there's only 5. But I also really focused on the fact that all of these stories are completely different from each other in plot, but all of them have Mallerman's unique voice. They all start with something that's extremely unsettling. They do a twist on the things you think you know, and they are compelling and original. And that's why you'd want to read them. What happens in each is not important. And in fact, what happens in each is wildly different, but the narrative voice is the same. But you don't have to read it to know that. You can read my review and share why someone would like this book. You also, when we're talking about conversation starters, it's a reminder to us that we're in a dialogue, not a monologue. It is hard when you're at the library and people know you hold the power. People see you as the person who is in charge and has all the answers. I understand that. And sometimes we lean in on that, right? And sometimes we forget that when we're dealing with people's reading needs, that it's a back and forth. But when we use a conversation starter rather than an item that we want to put in people's hands, we're listening more and we're learning from people. So let's talk about some examples of conversation starters. When you're in person and you're working with people, you want to have fun why question, okay? So this is how I think about things. And I'm going to give you a sheet with some of these, right? One of my favorites to ask is, what is your least favorite book? Because people do a double take. We want to give them the unexpected, right? Because they expect us to be, super positive and only good things about books. But ask people, what's your least favorite book? And I want to know why. And that shakes them out of complacency and gets them to realize you actually want to know. Again, I know they think we don't actually want to know, that we're just asking questions to get to the transaction. We need to double down on this. So when I'm in person with people, I like to have this idea of asking a question, not what's the last good book you read, or are you looking for something to read? One of my other things is really great is, what's your favorite book to recommend to others? This is a book they've read, but this is a book I know if you ask them, what's your favorite book or what's the last good book you read, they're going to blank. But when you ask a more open-ended fun why question to get to that why, what's your favorite book to recommend, people know right away. Right now, my favorite book to recommend is Chlorine by Jade Song. I gave it a star review in Booklist, so you can look that up. And it's a debut dark fantasy book. And it's amazing and blew me away. And I'm just telling everybody to read it because it has great cross-genre appeal. Another question I really like is, and we're going to get back to this one at the end, where do you get book recommendations for yourself? Too often, we have no idea where our patrons are getting their book recommendations. We need to know because, 1, that's the best place to start. And 2, we can add them to our lists of things that we all use to find things. And one I really like, rather than what was your favorite book last year, toward the end of the year too, what was the most fun you had reading a book in the last year? When you ask people what's the most fun, their answer comes out right away. For me, it was Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, which I'm sure is a lot of people's answer. And I know that some of you were like, that was fun. There was a lot of heavy stuff in there. But for me, I just enjoyed the reading experience so much. And I especially enjoyed how it was a story, a compelling and moving story about a friendship with, between a man and a woman with no sexual tension at all. And it was just about a friendship. And I really enjoyed that. So those are really great ways to do conversation starters. And again, I'm going to give you an exercise to do this. When you're socially distant, and I wrote this during the pandemic, but I want to make you understand that you can do this now, and here's how you do it. With passive readers advisory, I talked about curbside and readers advisory at length. You can read that post, but it's really about passive readers advisory. And one of my favorite things to do is, even though people are still coming in, they're still not always interacting with us, right? Because they're putting books on hold and they're going to the hold shelf and grabbing them. We can put bookmarks with these fun conversation starter questions in every book on the shelf. Every book. You can have one question for the whole month. And every book on your displays, every book on the hold shelf, everywhere where people are helping themselves, You put those questions in there as a bookmark. I'm going to give you a sheet for it in just a minute, how to do it. You take those questions and you tell people, if you let us know, or answers may appear on a future display. And I'm going to skip from online to both interactive displays. This is so important. We need to make our displays more interactive so that we show people we're listening. So if we use these fun why questions and we put them in every single book, this is how we start conversations. Because we can use those questions when we're talking to people, but we're going to get a lot more people if we put a little slip with a bookmark with one question in it for an entire month. But we also ask our staff that question. So we ask everyone on staff that question. We can build the display. What's the most fun you had reading a book last year? We build that display, fun reads, according to our staff. And then as the ones come in from patrons, and let me tell you, I am seeing shockingly 10 to 15% coming back from the library who does this. Those are huge numbers, right? It's the highest I saw was like a 19%, a library told me, but it's more in like the 10 range, like between 9 and 12. But they're getting back answers. And then people are coming in to see if their book showed up on the display. And when they do, they bring somebody. It's funny, adults are way more excited about this than kids. And they come in and they tell their friends and family. People come in and for the starter question without even getting a book. This is how we create relationships. This is how we book talk, not just with our words. This is how we share, right? We create this idea that everybody is listened to and everyone is part of our services. This works very well. I'm going to give you the sheet to use in a second. Unboxing videos between YouTube and Instagram and TikTok. These are amazing. Oh, if I go interactive displays, when you're putting those questions in the books, you should also make sure whatever social media works for your service area, you get your display, you get a picture of it, you do a TikTok of it, whatever, put it on Facebook, do all of them and say, we're looking for your answer to this question, and then get comments and take those comments and add them to your pile. Not only is this a way to listen to get your patrons to participate in serving each other and sharing and make them feel like they have a relationship with you now that's more than just transactional. It's also a great way for you to see and make sure you're collecting, because we see what books go out, but we have no idea what people think about them. This way, with this interactivity, we're just doing so much. This conversation goes wider, right? We're getting a conversation with people about what books they really enjoy and why they enjoy them. We can use that then to build our collections to be more responsive. Again, you take a picture of it though, or you do a little TikTok video about it, and you ask people to add their titles. Unboxing videos are really great. It's a thing we started doing during the pandemic too. And let me know, anybody, if you do unboxing videos or you have really good TikTok or Instagram Reader's Advisory, please drop it in the chat so other libraries can see it and use it, because we are going to be sharing that chat as well. And they can use it with their patrons as well, because you're all in the same area, and it'd be great if you could share ideas. So unboxing videos are a way we showed our, they always happened, but they picked up steam during the pandemic because libraries were closed. And it was a great way to get a more interactive way to show off your collections, your new books that are coming in. So there's more about that there. That's a really fun way to start conversations. You can use it to get excitement about your newest items and ask people what they're excited to read, what books they would want to add. It's a good way to have a conversation and encourage those suggest a purchase situations. You can use props as well to start a conversation. So I work with a lot of libraries and I have them get one of those little stands, and every time you're at the desk, you put an item. Doesn't have to be a book, an item. And it doesn't have to be something you've read, right? Or used. It can just be, I love this with Cirque. They're just like, this looked awesome, so I put it here. I have no idea what it's about. It's a conversation starter. A lot of people want to start with a book they've read and loved because it's a lot more, it's a lot easier to do that, right? When you're brand new doing this. But then I used to put out things just because I thought the cover was pretty, or it was an author I heard about but never read. And I use it to start a conversation. I talk about this in that link if you want to see more. And then finally, my favorite, I just worked with a teen library in Washington State yesterday, systems teen staff for Post-it note reviews, but you can do this at any age. This is a great way to also get started. You ask your staff, you send around an email to your staff. Again, start it with the staff so you fill the display. And you say to them, and this is really good for summer reading too, because you can give points for this or give people credit. You ask your staff to give you 3 books they love, which we're going to have an exercise for that, and a very short, could fit on a Post-it note, reason why they picked that book. Put it on a Post-it note, right? Have them write it on a Post-it note. It's better if it's everyone's handwriting, but whatever. And then put those face out on display. And then you give people, when they check out books, again, with that bookmark, with those fun conversation starters, you can also put a bookmark with Post-it note on it and say, return this book with your review on this Post-it note. And don't give them more instruction than that. Just send them on their way and see what you get back. But if they see that there's already a display out with Post-it note reviews, they will also do it. More in depth there about that. So that's conversation starter examples. Now, here's that sheet I promised you. Take this sheet. It also is linked if you click on it, and it's if you click on this to it. So these are conversation starter questions that you can use immediately to build interactive displays. And what I would like you to do is to get these. What book made you forget you were reading turns into a get lost in a good book display. What was the book you had the most fun reading? Again, I already did that fun read. What book do you recommend to everyone you know? That becomes a sure bets display or list. By the way, those are your best. Keep in your back pocket for whenever you're stuck to give a suggestion. What book most surprised you? These books surprised our readers. Display list. What's your favorite under the radar book? Forgotten favorites. And then this one is going to be give you a way to come up with new ideas. What's your favorite type of story? And you can use this to come up with ideas, right? Because we do the same old things all the time, right? The months, the identity months are awesome. Like we're coming up on Pride Month, and we have Black History Month and Women's History Month, and we're in AAPI month right now. Those are great, right? But what about smaller displays and ideas? If somebody says really popular are coming back are scary vampires, it's great. So I really like those scary vampires. So you can put up a tiny display of scary vampires. You can find out what people are really looking for, not genre, right? We're using natural language. What's your favorite type of story? So these are conversation starters that really make people realize that you're listening, okay? What do? Take each of these 6, get 6 different colors of paper and make bookmarks with each, right? And just run them off. So yellow is, what book made you forgot you were reading. Green is, what's the book you had the most fun reading? And for a month, like I said, put these in every book, every hold, every have circulation help you, every display, all ages, right? And ask people again on it, answer this question and return this with your book. Come back to the library to see your suggestion on display. And then give this to all your staff as well. In fact, I would say send this out to all staff. Tell them you learned this at a training and the trainer told you to do it. Get permission first if you're doing an all staff email. And ask everybody to answer all of these questions. It's a Google Doc, so they can just write on it and send it back to you. They can print it off, handwrite it, whatever. Then you have a basis for that display to start it, right? So you put we do forgotten favorites as a display. You stock it with all the forgotten favorites from your staff. Be awesome if it had every type of book, right? But some libraries, they make you do it by age level in each area. So that's fine too. It'd be great if this could be in a lobby though, for everybody to see the full breadth of experience of people in terms of their reading experience, because that's a conversation starter, right? But also to showcase the full breadth of your collection. So under the radar display is forgotten favorites, and then collect answers for a month. But keep track of the answers, because you can bring this display back. And again, you can also use it for collection development. You're having a conversation among everybody about books. And that's what we want to do. When we create spaces where people are having conversations around books and about books without the need for that transaction, we create lasting relationships that lead to increased budgets and support when anything goes wrong, and just door counts going up, all the things our administration want to see. Okay, so you can do that. That is the one thing you can take back and do immediately. You can have a display up probably in a week. Now, let's move on from sharing to the handoff. Now, I've been saying, don't worry about the transactions. You're just having conversations. You are going to get books in readers' hands this way. I don't want you to think that I'm just like, we're not going to check out any books. We want to change our mindset and talk more about the conversations that we're having, because when we talk about the conversations, we change our whole perspective. Now, the transactions will come, okay? So how we hand off books to people or how we get them in their hands matters. And how we're doing that matters more than giving people the right suggestion. I want to start with that right now. I want to bust that myth that there's a right way to a right suggestion for every interaction. There is not. This is not like a reference question where there's an answer that we can find a resource for. The right suggestion may end up being a book they've already read. Let me explain. When we start talking to people, when we ask them things like, what's the most fun you had reading a book in the last year? And they give us an answer. And we want to start having a conversation. Oh, I know about that book. Sometimes we either talk about a book that we think they might like right away because we know, or we just are like, well, here's mine. Okay, so let's talk about that. If you want to start and you don't even know the book they liked, you can ask them, why'd you like that book? You can look it up while they're talking or just talk to them about it. And then you can say, that's awesome. Here's that answer to my question. And yes, I realize that takes you totally away from helping them find a book. And it might be a completely different type of fun that you had reading. But the point is you're having that conversation, right? Then you can steer it back around to, well, what were you looking to get today? What other kinds of books are you going to have? And let's go look at this display. Or do you know we have a display about that? You should go see it. In fact, the question you're using for your display should be the question you're using to help bring everything together. But if they do talk about a book and they mention a book like Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, and you say to them, you know, I really love, lots of people love that book, or I love that book too. And have you read, and you mentioned something like, have you read Frederick Bach? It's a great read alike, right? For that, like Anxious People is a really good read alike for that. And they'll say, oh, yes, I did. I just love that book. A lot of people think they were wrong by doing that. You actually aren't wrong. You're very right. If you are suggesting a book that someone already read, you are actually proving to them that you're listening to them. So again, we want to change our mindset, okay? And if we give people a book that they didn't like, it doesn't matter because this is how we hand off, right? Again, we're thinking about that relationship, not that transaction. You want them to come back. So when you hand a book off to people, be like, you know, it seems like from the resources we have, from what other readers have said, that you're also going to like this book. I do like to get people to take 3. And I say with the handoff, this is important. Make it clear that I'm like, you know, they're prepaid, never free. They're not free. That minimizes what we're doing, and it makes people not value the service. Remind people that they're prepaid. These books are prepaid, right? You can take as many as you want. I really think we're going to find you 3 to take. So you have a range of outcomes here. You might like all of them, but you might only like one. And the worst thing that would have to happen is for you to go home to start to read. You're all ready to read tonight. You open it and you don't like it. At least you have 2 more options. There's a higher percentage chance that you're going to like one. When people are still unwilling to do it, if they're good users and I have a relationship, I say things to them like, I don't care if you read them, but it really helps our circulation statistics if you take 3, and it'll make my bosses happy. That's enough usually. Or, you know, say things like, we don't care if you return them unread. We just want to know that you have what you need and you can always come back and get it again. But the thing I'm really clear about when I do the handoff is I would love for you to come back. And I kind of hinted at this before, right? And tell me about the book and why you liked it or didn't like it. So we can help get it into the hands of the right reader and other people. And if it's not the book for you, let's see what we can do next time. Again, it's a relationship. So stop worrying about making the right suggestion and start worrying about that relationship. Also, make sure what you're sharing is inclusive. I have a whole longer talk and program about being more inclusive with our Readers Advisory services, but you want to make sure you're not just giving out the best-selling authors, the only white cis people. You want to make sure you're giving people a range of experiences and situations and things they can read about, and that you're inclusive both with the genres you're offering, but also the identity of the people writing. So now let's talk about examples. I already gave a little bit of this because I think it's important to discuss. So when we are giving a handoff, though, we want to explain why we're mentioning a book when we do move to that matching them. And it might just be somebody else who really liked that book told me the same thing, and I'm giving that, so I'm going to give you that. You want to prove you heard people when you're having that conversation. This goes back when I said we're talking about listening. And I already did some of these. Sorry, I get excited on this one. Explain why you think this book will work for them, and use words that they used when they talk to you. Show people that you're listening to them. And again, we're going to encourage feedback. We're going to encourage conversations, and that leads to relationships. The more times we can get people to come back and tell us what they thought, and make sure they know, you can tell me. I always say, if you didn't like it, you don't mind, write it. Like, don't feel like it's a, make sure you're internalizing what I said, that there's no right decision, there's no right answer. And tell people, look at all these books you have. There are books here for you. There are to add those books. So these conversations are going to make it better for all of us. Make it very clear that you are about the conversation. I talked about it a lot at the beginning because that's the hardest thing, I think, for people to internalize this. You're not getting this right or wrong. That's why it's the art of the handoff, right? It's not black or white. Again, lots of reinsertions to take items home. And honestly, that interactivity that we're already adding from our conversation starters, the things I already talked to you about, will bring them back. And that's important. Remind them, hey, thanks for filling this out. Especially sometimes people would just give it. We had them at the desk and they would give them to us. This is awesome. We're going to be putting this display up next month, and look for your titles there. Don't put anybody's name on them, and don't ask for a name on that bookmark either. We want to protect people's privacy. And if they share their name, don't share it, right? And on Post-it notes, if they do Post-it note reviews and they leave their name, I usually black them out because it's not okay. And it's weird to have some and not others. So, all right, that's the art of the handoff. And then we're coming to our last secret, and that's inspiring all staff to help. This is what I was talking about at the beginning when I said the more we share with each other, the better our service will be, okay? Working together is your best resource. Working together here by coming to these classes and learning together, but also taking back what you learned and sharing it with everyone else, okay? Why is working together your best resource? Well, first of all, we have lots of resources we can use and lots of ways we can find why people liked books and share them with our patrons. But the best resource is in our libraries, right? Because we all work together. We're all serving the same patron base and we're all using the same collections. But it goes deeper than that. It goes back to this fact, and this is really hard for people. You're gonna never know about every book. You're not even gonna get to read every book you think you wanna read. And the sooner you come to terms with the fact that you're not gonna read and or know every book, and you know that, and start coming to terms with the fact that that's not your goal. Your goal is to know where to find everything. Your goal is to know how to bring people together to work together. So you need to let go of that, right? You're not going to be perfect at this, and that's okay. And you embrace this fact, which I've already mentioned, that every single person on staff can be part of this core service. I had examples throughout where I mentioned talking to the whole staff. The compound interest of, and we're going to talk about ways to work together even more in the next slide. The compound interest of every person working together gets you from one book that you read. If every person did one book on your staff and you have 40 staff members, you went from the one book you read to having 40 books you can offer. If you get them to participate and stop worrying about where they fall on the organizational chart. Your cleaning staff and your pages and your children's staff, they can all help with the adult books. Adult staff can help with the children's books, right? When I was if you don't ask all staff to participate, how do you know? We found out when erotica exploded at libraries, right? With 50 Shades of Grey, we found out our #1 reader of erotica this whole time was a woman who worked in children's. We would have never known if we didn't ask, right? Regularly what people were reading. We sent out things to our staff all the time. What is everybody reading? Share something with us. Well, maybe we'll put it on display and we'll add you to the staff recommendation shelf, even though you don't work in our department. It saved us because she knew everything about erotica. She knew about the authors. She helped us build our collection. She helped us book talk with it. We wouldn't know because she can't talk about it at the children's desk. Here's the thing though, as I've traveled the country since though, wherever I go, who works in children's? Hands up. Who works in children's and reads erotica? Half the hands that went up that they worked in children's. I just did this the other day in person. And oh my goodness, the hands went flying who read erotica, who worked in children's. It was awesome. But you don't know if you don't ask. And again, the more staff that are included, the more diverse and varied your pool of suggestions will be, both because you're asking people who don't work with the collection the same all the time. So you're going to get different answers to the question from different perspectives, but also you're going to get more different experiences, especially because when we talk about librarianship, we're 88% white ladies, but when we talk about our staff that are not degreed librarians, that's where more of our diversity is. So we're going to get more examples that represent different identities and different points of view. And that's what we really want to do. So let's give some examples of inspiring all staff to help. First of all, I've mentioned this multiple times. We don't want to wait for volunteers. We want to invite participation among all staff. Again, you might need permission to send an all staff email, but and I have a longer post about this, you will get slides, by the way, if anybody was worried. You might have a way, and if anyone's doing this, please share. It's a way, you might have to get permission to send an all staff email. So you can use this talk as your reasoning. Go to your supervisor and say, hey, I learned today in my training that we should be including the whole staff in our reader advisory conversations to get more varied responses and to make it, because it's great team building too, right? When everybody's involved in our core service books, it helps everybody feel like they're more part of the conversation. And I'm going to do that in just a moment. I'm going to give you an example if you don't believe me. We don't want to wait for volunteers. We want to invite participation. Send out those emails. Do them regularly, the top of the month, with one of those conversation starter questions, right? Or just send out that whole conversation starter sheet and ask people to fill it out. And get people regularly send out emails asking people to share what they're reading so that it can be used for service to all patrons. And share what they're watching. The video department, the AV department can do it. The children's department can do it, whatever it is. When we invite participation, we open the door to so many more opportunities. Let me give you a very basic example. Many years ago, I went to a library in central Indiana with 3 branches, and I did a full day of training with them. And in the morning, it was for all staff. It was a talk, my basic readers advisory talk, and then my book talking talk. And then we had a break for lunch, and then there were breakouts that were like different levels. So the director called me about a week before, and she said, Becky, I just want to verify. You said that you want every staff member at the morning training. And I said, yes, I do, because it's for the whole staff. It's a lot of, this is like a summary of what I talked about with them. And she said, well, okay, but like, my custodial staff, they don't need to come. I'm like, yes, they do. This is about the whole library. Could you please have everybody there? I want them to feel included. And she grudgingly sent her custodial staff. We're going to call him George, but one of the older members of her custodial staff, he liked to call himself a janitor. He was there, and he was staying in the back for the first talk. And by the second talk, he had moved to the front. And by after lunch, he was allowed to do whatever he wanted for the afternoon. Some people were assigned to certain things. By the afternoon, he was just following me, sitting in the front row, asking questions, participating. At the time, I did not know he was part of the janitorial staff. Let me let you know. I later found out by talking to him, and he was so excited. Okay, now I left. And in my talk, I talked about a lot of these things. We talked about book talking to everybody. We talked about encountering patrons in the stacks and just engaging them in conversations about books. We talked about how everyone has a part to play in readers advisory, no matter where they work in the organization. A few months later, the director of that library called me to do something for an article, and she was getting a quote from me. And she said, oh, I want to give you an update on George, the janitor. And I was like, oh. And she's like, Becky, thank you so much for making me have him be part of the day. I cannot tell you how great this is. This is why working together matters. She said, Becky, he started taking everything to heart, and he traveled to all 3 buildings, and he would just encounter patrons in the stacks and start asking them, oh, what book are you reading? Here's a book I really like. He just had conversations with people everywhere he went. The staff started to overhear him talking to patrons and said, hey, what's that book? We didn't, he was an older man, and the staff was definitely younger than him. And so they didn't read the same books as him. And they were like, oh, what is that book? Oh. So what happened was they started having conversations with him, realizing what he was reading, learning more about him as a person and not just as the person who cleaned up. Got more engaged with him, started making displays of George's pick and or including him on the staff pick shelf, which they never would have done before because he was the janitor, even though we all work for the library. People would ask, where's George? What's he reading? That actually led to the George Pick shelves because he was at all the different buildings. And she was explaining all this to me and how invigorating it was for everyone, for staff, for George, and for the patrons. And then she added this, and this was the kicker. The library has never been cleaner. George was more invested in his job because he was more connected to our core service, and his opinion mattered. And it was a team building exercise for everyone. I'm going to give you a way to do this with your team, and we're going to go over it at the end of this presentation. But I think that's what we talk about when we want to invite participation. By inviting him to the program and encouraging him to attend, they made him part of the library's core service. Now, that's one way to do it. There's other ways in that post. Goodreads shelves. This was part of my Stock Your RA pantry. When we were during the pandemic and people were closed, I was giving exercises regularly on how to get more readers advisory resources to pay your staff to do things, right? So stocking your RA pantry has multiple ideas, but Goodreads shelves are an excellent way to start working together and to include participation. Why? Because Goodreads, for better or worse, it's a place where it's easy to group yourselves together. So I have a post there with a bunch of libraries who've organized themselves as a library on Goodreads, and specifically the Des Moines Public Library, who I worked with to do this. You go get a Goodreads account with your work email address. No one is asking you to use your personal email to suggest books to readers on Goodreads. You should be doing this as a library employee with your library email. Because Goodreads is based on emails, you can have 2 accounts. And encourage people to put on their shelves books that they really enjoyed, nothing they haven't enjoyed, 3 stars and above, and get somebody to be, probably you, because you came to this training, to be in charge of it all, and get a standard set of tags, right? Create a list of tags that people can use so that, one, your patrons can come and see what the library is reading. Not only will you be helping your patrons by getting that compound interest of more books out there, you're going to help each other, because the person who really loves mysteries may be on vacation for 2 weeks and you got this rabid mystery reader in and you're not sure how to help them. And you can go to the Goodreads shelf for that person, or if you don't remember who it is, you can use the tags your library has created. It's like a little mini catalog for mystery and thriller, or mystery and crime, or whatever you use, and look at what they're reading and go look at their 5 stars. And what you want to ask people to do is just give a why they liked the book, right? Because the synopsis will be there on Goodreads. And when we say why you liked the book, maybe it's 2 sentences. And by the way, we're going to do an exercise at the end where every staff member who does it is going to give you 3 books and why they like them. So you can use that as an impetus for them to start their Goodreads as well. But you can also go to places like Novelist and just look at their appeal factors and use their language and just put in there, and you have permission to do this, right? Appeal factors from Novelist, but just get something in there as to why you like it, right? Here's the thing, right? You can use that to help people. So you could say, well, our staff member likes it for this reason. This narrows down the options in Goodreads and gives you a local person to hand sell the book, whether they're there or not. It helps you find resources too. If you know that you want to find who likes graphic novels in your library and see what's on their shelf, you can then maybe contact them, even if you don't work the same shifts or in the same department, and have a conversation. Again, working together creates team building as well, because you're all helping people. Again, your children's librarian who loves erotica can fill her shelf with the erotica because she's not talking to the kid, right? But she's helping people. The other thing about this is, and it goes back to those interactive displays, you can take any book, tell people, any book you gave 5 stars, we can add to our staff recommendation shelf. Again, this opens up your staff recommendation shelf to include people that might be in a different branch, that might be in a different department, that might be the janitor, to put their books on your staff recommendation shelf. You can make a staff recommendation shelf virtually. You can make one in the library. And if you have a couple words, a sentence or 2 as to why they liked the book, you can put that on a Post-it note. You can do all of these things, right? The opportunities are endless when you work together. So those of you who have staff recommendation shelves, please share if you include people outside your department. Because I was always giving to the children's department, because when my kids were different ages, I was adding like our favorite easy readers, our favorite middle grade books. And I loved being able to do that and have that opportunity. But you have to act, right? Because that culture is not there in the library. We're so siloed that we don't think about interacting with each other. And when we interact with each other more, we're going to feel that interactivity spirit and spread it out to everyone else. Again, did you listen to your patrons? I kind of already hinted at this. That's the way to work together, right? Use what they've shared and those answers to those questions. And that's the way to work together as well. And again, if you want to look at my COVID success story, it is the Des Moines Public Library, and you can read about them. They went from nothing before the pandemic, to people across all their branches who didn't know each other, coming together in virtual trainings, and then having virtual meetings and working together to create an entire reader services team. Okay, so my final thoughts before we go to talking about what you're going to do at your library to inspire this to happen are that, again, we're working on relationships, not transactions. Use this renovation I gave you today as your inspiration, right? You watch HGTV, you see somebody do something to their house, you like some of the things, but not all of them, or realize you love this, but it might not work at your library. Use it as your inspiration. Take what I have told you. Go look at all those examples. Use the handouts I'm giving you. And I have a link later to even more ideas at the end. And take bits and pieces and do what's going to work for you. And then see how it works. And don't be afraid to scrap it and try something else. Just use this as your inspiration to sort of change your mindset. And what is that secret recipe? It's, again, putting down into just those 4 secret recipes: share, converse, hand off, work together. So figure out ways to share first and foremost, prioritize sharing, find ways to have a conversation about the sharing, about the books. Don't just make it a monologue. Figure out your best ways to do the handoff, which then feeds back to those conversations, right? To bring them back, a handoff that brings them back, doesn't just get a book in their hands, bye-bye. And then how to work together, both as a team, as a whole library, because that's really the key, is the working together. It's why it's at the end. It's also because it makes sense, but it's there because this is where it comes together. The more voices you can have involved, the better. Now, I worked at a union library, and I'm going to be straight up. If you work at a union library, clearly you cannot make people do this. Like, you'd be surprised when you ask around who wants to participate. Again, before you start trying to force participation, talk to your supervisor, or if you're the supervisor, talk to the director to figure out the way that it will work best for your library. But make everything fit your strengths, your staff, and your patrons. Don't do something that if you don't have people making TikToks, don't start trying to make TikToks, right? There's a couple of libraries. Actually, if you want to look it up, Eastham, Massachusetts, Eastham, Eastham. They do, I know my friend Corey is in charge of adult services there, and he does their TikTok. And I just love their videos. And he has these 2 older women who work for him who are totally game to help. And he makes himself the butt of the joke, which really works really well because he's the boss and he was kind of the new boss and he wanted to do this and people were a little wary, but it works really well. And they do it for all their adult services. Super fun. They have a really funny one out now about their next escape room, and Corey's trapped and the other staff are like, we're not going to let him out, but you can come to the escape room and help him get out. Just ways to create conversations and relationships. And they've been doing this series of TikToks. And the butt of the joke is that Corey is the one that can't do anything right, answers trivia wrong, doesn't know what's going on. And it works because it's creating this conversation in their community. And again, that bonus secret, that Reader's Advisory Service is 60% listening and 40% action. And I say this every time after I've talked for an hour, and I know it doesn't make sense, but it is, trust me. All right, I'm going to take questions in a minute. I'm going to turn off the video, but first I want to go through what this one exercise I'm going to have you take back to your libraries. It's going to take about 5 or so minutes to explain it. And that's the reader profile exercise. And there's a link here to it, and you should be getting one as well, but there's a link right there. It's a Google Doc. First of all, any questions, ask me at any time. There's my email, there's my Twitter. If you want me to follow you on Twitter, and you don't have that you work at a library in your bio, DM me and let me know. Because I don't automatically follow back. I get a lot of authors who try to follow me and creep into my DMs. So I'm trying to make sure I am careful about who I follow back. Okay, but also a lot of what I'm talking about is based on my 10 rules of basic Reader's Advisory Service. So that's a page that always lives on my blog, which puts all of these things. We have 4 secrets here. That has 10 rules. It goes into a little bit more detail. And has my link to my 5 resources you cannot live without, which are just really fast. Novelist and Goodreads, which I already mentioned, Book Riot, because they have really responsive lists and articles. And they're also written to, they're about getting clicks and they're written directly to the consumer. So, you know, some people look down on that. And I say, why? They're doing it. They're speaking with a voice that's directly to readers. We don't always do that. And it's a really good example to follow off of. Also, they have a baseline diversity requirement. So you're not going to get just lists that are, if you're saying, well, I don't know how to diversify my list, you can use their list to diversify. And they have really great newsletters. So that's all there. Another one is my favorite is, and this is totally a conversation, author rec of other authors. That's one of my favorite resources. So the biggest example is Stephen King, right? Stephen King will tweet out totally, no, you can't ask him for this, right? But if he loved a book, he'll talk about it. And even if it's like nowhere in a genre similar or a writing style similar to Stephen King, this is amazing how this happens, right? People will read it and love it. I have found over time, and I wrote about this in my latest book as well, people are more predisposed to like a book, even if you on paper are like, you're not gonna like this book, if their favorite author said they like it. They go in thinking they're gonna like it. And often it's a way for them to try something new. And then the last one is something called Ganooks, and you can go look at it if you'd like. It's there on the 10 Rules of Basic Readers Advisory Service. Also on that page is my list that constantly updated of my favorite free genre resources. Okay, but your next step. First of all, I'm going to remind you, because this is going to be the last slide we see when I take us out to the reader profile, that interactive displays are your goal, right? That is the best way, and lists, but interactivity is the best way to have these conversations. And that document in the middle of this presentation is the first place you should start. But I remind you, interactivity is key. But I would like to talk about, okay, good, it is there, it shows, is the reader profile exercise. This is something I do when I go to libraries and work with them as a whole library, but I'm gonna ask you to take this back to your library and do this with as many people as possible. I'm gonna go over this. So if you do have questions, we'll get to those in about 10 minutes. So make sure you can write them in now and I will get to them. Or if you wanna share something and we wanna talk about it or you want some help. But this is something all of you should take back to your library. What is this? This is a chance for every person on your staff who wants to do this to be both the reader's advisor and the patron. In order to understand the conversations we're having, we have to have both sides of the conversation. But also, this will give you a lot of information about people and help you build some of those working together staff interactions. So this is a short survey about your own personal leisure reading habits, and there are no correct answers. Have fun. I'm gonna go over the questions with you right now. It's two-sided, double-sided. And I'm gonna then we're gonna talk about how to use it, okay? So first, tell me about 3 of your favorite books and why you like them. These can be current favorites, all-time favorites, or just books you remember really liking. So you wanna ask people to give you just short versions of books they like and why. If you remember, we can use this for staff recommendation shelves. We can use this for people to start their Goodreads. We can use this for people to do Post-it note reviews, okay? So let's be thinking about that. Those are secondary outcomes of this. I'm gonna talk about primary outcomes when we finish it. But again, that you can remind people, hey, now maybe you should start a Goodreads and here are the 3 books and here you already have the words to do it. So there's my example. Here's an example. Pachinko by Min-Jin Lee. I love how this is a family saga, a sweeping novel of the 20th century with tons of well-drawn characters and a frame I knew nothing about. That's why I liked it. So 3 books and why. And then again, ask people about their 3 least favorite books and why you did not enjoy them. This could include books you stopped reading before finishing. Outlander by Diana Gabaldon. Although I normally like historical fiction and time travel stories, there was way too much romance here for my tastes. This is very important because it helps you understand, while we're not going to put negative reviews out on Goodreads, this is going to help you understand why sometimes when we are using reviews on Goodreads with people, that sometimes that 2-star review is more helpful than the 5 or 4-star review. Why? Because why someone didn't like a book might be the exact reason why you would. So for me, this book was sold to me as historical fiction and time travel, which I love with time travel, but I'm not a big fan of romance as the main story element. And for me, when I read it, my version of the book, it was all romance. Somebody else might see this review and be like, oh, I love all of those things. The reason you didn't like the book is the exact reason why I'm going to like it. The reason we're also asking here is for us to get examples of books someone didn't like, because we're going to actually be suggesting books to the person who fills this out. Then we have circle your top 5 reading areas here. Notice I just have nonfiction. Then I have others. So you can fill in true crime, conspiracy, American history. I love to read travel books just for fun. Young adult. And again, there's subgenres in there. I really enjoy realistic middle grade fiction. So I would put that in there, especially kids from backgrounds different than mine to see their experiences. I really love those books. But here are places you can circle. This gives you a sense, gives people a sense they can pick 5 of their favorite reading areas and explain there. Please mark the formats you enjoy reading. This is here for a couple of reasons. This is here for one, it's interesting to have people think about formats, and they can leave notes. Like when I did this form, I was like audiobooks, but especially books that are over 500 pages, historical fiction, and mysteries and nonfiction. Like those are what I read in audiobook. Like I made notes. And it's important because some people like different formats, but also this is a really great way for you to gauge what formats that maybe you didn't know were so popular at your library. But it's also the main reason is accessibility. Too often we forget that some people really won't read a hardcover. And it's not just old people, because it's just too heavy, right? That they want to read print, but they need to have it in paperback. Or people who prefer large type, who you may not think need help with large type, right? Or people really want to see, like they like The Handmaid's Tale, but in the graphic novel version. It's an accessibility issue. And this is about being inclusive in all ways and understanding accessibility. Let's start with our staff and see what they're like. But we should be asking our patrons also more often. And then please let me know about the types of books you enjoy the least. This is more, you see, it's more amorphous, right? What do you not enjoy? What books what kind of tropes do you not want a book if an animal is hurt at all in it? Do you not want a book that takes place in, like my husband's Ukrainian, he's the first generation. He's like, don't give me anything with a Russian in it. I don't even want to talk about it. Like, what do you not want to see? And it can be something that triggers you, but it can also just be like, I really don't like when books, like the reason I don't like romance is not the kissing and all that. It's, I hate that they're predicated on a misunderstanding almost always. And I am from New Jersey. I'm a very upfront, blunt person. And when I read these books, I'm like, why didn't you just tell him? Like, why you're holding a grudge because of something that's your fault. If you were just open and honest, but then there wouldn't be a book. So I get that. Like some people like that. It drives me bananas. So that's something I don't enjoy. It's not romance, it's that sort of thing that predicates on it. Like, don't even get me started on Pride and Prejudice. That book could have been over in like 5 pages. What is your favorite resource to use when looking for a good read for yourself? I think remember I told you to ask your patrons what resources they are using. This one is really important because one, well, let me talk about the secondary example. If we have a list of what all our staff are using as resources, some of them may not be resources that they have shared with anybody else, not because they're trying to keep it secret, but because they're very much interested in it. They just don't know that other people don't know they use it. All right. Also, when we get these with each other, it's a place you're going to start. So let's start going back, talking about what you're going to do with these. You're going to take these back to your library and you're going to talk to your supervisor, whoever it is, to say, can we do this exercise as a library? And can we require it? And if we can't require it, can I give it out and get people to give it back? When you get these filled out, you take all of them and you make copies of all of them so that you have a reader profile for your library, okay? To get a sense of again, you can use all the answers about the books they like to make sure that you start staff recommendation shelves right away. You don't have to wait to get those started, right? You get those when you get these back. People love filling this out, by the way. Sometimes I'm in trainings and people are filling it out while I am still in training, even though I say, please wait and do this after, so you have some time to think about it. And also take that list of all the favorite resources to use when looking for a good read for yourself and get those on your website so everyone can use them, so we can share with everyone. They are staff's favorite resources for looking for a good read for themselves. And then also ask your patrons and then make a list on the website, our patrons' favorite resources looking for a good read for themselves. Share that knowledge, show your staff and your patrons that you're listening and that you want to know how they find books. You are going to find gems. Every library I've done this with has gotten back to me to say, we found some gems that we didn't know people were using. Okay, so that's the first thing. You're going to create a reader. It's also really interesting for you to look at to cross-reference, if you're a data person, the staff favorite reading areas with your circulation numbers, because sometimes you'll see that like you don't have anybody on staff who's reading science fiction, but this is common at libraries. It's one of the biggest growth areas in terms of year-to-year increase in readership. And it's a different type of readership as well. It's not just, white men anymore. That's one of the things that's happening with, and it's getting younger, right? So science fiction, right? But you see, you only have 2 people on staff that really like science fiction. We might need to identify doing some science fiction training. Find a science fiction expert at your library. That person, no matter where they fall on the organizational chart, ask them to participate in the reader in training the staff, or ask them to put more books on their Goodreads shelf, whatever they're comfortable doing, or get someone to come in and talk about it. Okay. Now, the other thing you're going to do once you have that staff reader profile, great. The goal here, though, is to do that team building and working together and to be part of the conversation. That's all going to happen here. Take all of them and switch them up. Ideally, we're not just doing one-to-one. It's not just me and Kelly trading, right? You want to get a 3-way match at least. Well, that's the most you can do, right? So mine goes to Kelly, and Kelly's goes to Vicky's, and Vicky's goes to Johnny, and Johnny's goes to Abby, and Abby goes to Melissa, and Melissa goes to me. Okay. And ideally, it's not people that work together regularly. I realize some of you are from very small libraries, and that's not going to happen. Why is this going to happen? Because everyone's going to get a chance to be the reader's advisor and the patron, to be on both sides of the conversation. So everyone who fills this out, you then randomly assign them out to other people. When I did this in my class, I used to just fan them out and have people take them. And if it was theirs, they had to put it back, right? And you give everybody some time to look at the one they received. Okay, so you've done yours, you've sent it off. Now you're getting one. First place you start to help that person is their favorite resources to use when looking for a good read for themselves. Start there. Use the information you've received and get back to them via email, on a piece of paper, however you want, with 3 resources or 3 books that you think they may enjoy. Get that out to them. At the same time, you're getting 3 books back. So you've done that. I suggested 3 books. We'll see what happens. And you're going to see, by the way, it's not the end of the world if you get it wrong. That's the other thing about this, right? Come back. You get 3 resources. Now you have 3 books to read. Take the time to check one out, to just maybe look through it, to read about it on Goodreads or on Novelist, and get back to the person to say, this book looks like I might really like it. I don't have time to read it now, but I will, or I'm going to read this right away. Or I read that book and loved it. Or this is an author I've always meant to read. Or I took a look at that book. It might not be right for me. But have a conversation via email back with the person who helped you, and then talk about the books. Here's the thing about this. Not only is it a conversation starter and a way to have a relationship with another staff member, you're having it with 2 different staff members, right? You're creating new relationships based with somebody you probably didn't know that well. But also, the library, when this is going on, is talking to each other about it. They're like, who did you get? What are you suggesting? Oh, that's fascinating. Or you see somebody you don't really see very often. What books did you put down as your favorite, your recent favorite? It creates conversation about books on its own. And that's our goal. I'm going to stop sharing so I can take questions. That's our goal. And you are going to be able to connect with each other and set that example and have those conversations around the library that you maybe weren't having. And everybody gets to understand what the Reader's Advisory relationship is about. So that is the secret to having stellar Reader's Advisory conversations in our new world. And I'm going to start looking at some of the questions because I see that I got some, but please put them in if you did not do that. All right. So, oh, great. Somebody started doing monthly staff recommendation posts on our social media. Awesome. I love the Canva template. Yes. Take those questions and ask people, don't force them. You get a great response though, as you're going, as people see how much fun it is. And I've had staff be like, they checked out my book, like they talked about a book, and then they went and checked if it was checked. They talked about a book on Facebook or wherever. Then they went to see if it was checked out, and then they get so excited that they want to do another one. Don't underestimate this joy. Let's talk about book reviews are one of the ways I teach my students to find their next read. I agree. The reviews are really, when I write my reviews for Book List and Library Journal, I am writing it to the best reader for that book. And I am sharing why someone would like that book. And I truly believe my book reviews are there to help somebody find their next read. And I will tell you that Booklist and Library Journal want that from their reviewers and try to get that out. And I'm glad you don't worry about the organizational chart. That is a huge issue. It's not just where someone falls on the organizational chart. I mean, I call my company RE for All because I truly believe everyone can do this. I truly believe that. And I'm speaking as someone with a master's degree. Like, I don't think you need a master's degree to be good at most of the things we do in libraries, quite honestly. Although I have one and I wouldn't trade having it for the world. But I do think, especially when it comes to readers advisory, everyone on staff can participate, but also not what department they're in. Again, it's not just about top to bottom, it's about those silos we create across. And I'm glad people enjoyed it and have so many ideas. I hope you take this back to your library and try to institute the reader profile at the very least, and the conversation starter book display. I know that a lot of this for some people is completely different than the way they've been doing things. And again, I've had library directors say, Becky, I don't want my staff talking at the desk about what they're reading. This is not easy for some libraries. If you're having trouble instituting any of these things, please, I put my email in the slides, but I'm going to add it here as well so that you know, and you can send it to me. Please send it to me. Please, I've had directors come to me. My staff member said you told them to do this and I'm against it. And they send me an email and I have a phone conversation with them. And we talk about why they're wrong. I mean, there's a reason I do this training all over the country. You're going to get better return on your checkouts. You're going to get better buy-in from your patrons. They're going to be happier, more satisfied, and more engaged with your service. So we still have a few minutes. I left this time for questions if anybody has questions. If anyone wants to share things they're doing, I'm going to take a drink. But if not, we can. Oh, great, this is perfect. I'm going to read these out loud for people. One of the things the YS department sets up for the summer is our listening station. It's a cardboard structure that is built each year and decorated to a theme. Kids ages 6 to 9 come in, and when they ask to go in and tell us 3 things they liked about the book they just finished, and when they're done, they get a small prize. That's interactive. Thank you, Palm Harbor Library. Contact Palm Harbor Library Allison if you want more information. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Make an incentive. Summer reading is the best time to do this. Give prizes for being interactive. Then, if you want, take it even further. 3 things they liked about the book. Listen to them, and ask them to write one of them in their own handwriting on a Post-it note. My favorite are the kid Post-it notes. And put it on a book, and then put that book on display. Don't put their name on it, but take one of the things they tell you and say, can you write this one on a Post-it note, or help them summarize it for kids? And we're going to put that book on display so somebody else can know about that. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Then when that kid puts that on display, when they see it on display, the pride they will have is worth more than the prize. They will go tell their friends, the library put my book up. Their friends will come in. I do want to say this while I have you and there's time, because I love giving these talks around summer reading, and lots of the things I'm saying work really well with summer reading. We have to remember, especially when we're talking about everybody that's like 18 and under, we are dealing with an entire generation of library users who don't know or remember summer reading in person at the library. I can't stress this enough. I was just at Fairfax County, Virginia, training all of their YS staff in person for this exact reason. They wanted help going to outreach to their school libraries, and they wanted help getting kids to come into the library, because so many kids have done the summer reading program virtually. And as kids age out, like especially I worked with a group of teens in Washington, teen libraries, for our whole system yesterday. Those teens haven't done summer reading since they were kids. Summer reading is totally different when you're a teen, right? And we don't want to lose that. These interactivities are important for us to remember in summer reading, to instill that. Question about where we can go besides Goodreads and Novelist. One of my favorite places now, I'm starting to be on Storygraph. They're getting a lot more information. Fantastic Fiction is another good place to go for information. And honestly, Instagram and Twitter, where the authors are posting things, or where readers, Bookstagram is a great place to go find people who are talking about books, and Book TikTok. It's totally up to you. I tried doing a patron recommendation display with bookmarks to fill out, but did not get any patrons to fill out the bookmark. I think the reason it didn't work was because of my coworkers wanted to hype it up to patrons. what I think didn't work is because none of my coworkers wanted to hype it up to patrons and get patrons to fill out the bookmarks. The training makes me want to try again and get my coworkers more on board. Thank you. Yes, that's why I add that working together, that getting your coworkers on board is key. But summer reading is the perfect time to do it. I hope you do summer reading for adults and children, right? We did adult summer reading. Give adults points for participating. And if you're, and this is common, a lot of my coworkers didn't always want to get on board as well. And some of them actively said things like, isn't that dumb? And I was like, it's not actually, look at how much fun we're having. The Post-it note reviews get people's attention. This giving a point, giving a prize for it is the way to get it filled. I worked at a library who did a lot of these, like the Post-it note reviews during the summer, and they gave you a point for every Post-it review for like their bingo card or their prize wheel, whatever, for the adults. And they put a Post-it note in every book, right, that went out. They got them to put a Post-it note in the circulation desk, right? And they came back, and then they had people that kept doing it after summer reading, and they would just find books, like come back with Post-it notes, and circulation would be like, what should I do with this? I'm like, we're gonna put it up just randomly on the shelf. So that's really great. But when you get your patrons excited about it, and then the other staff, all this happened at my library. The other staff see how excited the patrons are. Did you see my book on this floor? I can't wait till I can see what category this book's gonna fit in, or I can't wait to write my Post-it note review of this. They get to catch the infection and the bug, and they want to do it. So thank you. And let me know, Jen, when you try, if it does work, you get them more excited. Do the reader profile exercise too, and then they'll be excited about sharing. And we're just about out of time. So if there are no more questions, I'm gonna let you go. And yes, Kelly, it gives patrons a sense of ownership over the library. That is exactly what I'm trying to do. They are more engaged, they feel part of your service, and it is their library. Too often staff forget, and we try to be gatekeepers, right? We try to be gatekeepers and tell everybody that this library we're in charge and we get to say what goes. But really, I like to tell people, and you can use this line to people who are stubborn, we're not actually successful till every single item is checked out at the same time. Because it's their library, it's not ours. The books, the items should be out and being used. For every item that is in the library, that's one item we didn't get out. Now, guess what? You're never gonna have every item checked out at the same time. So that is job security for you, but that could be your goal, right? We talk about mission and vision, that's your vision. A library where every single thing is in someone's hands that they're enjoying. That every item is circulated in the last year. We wanna be a little more realistic. You are very welcome, everyone. And thank you, Kelly, for summarizing that sense of ownership. That's what we're trying to do. I'm glad people liked it. I hope those of you watching the recording all of you go back and watch the recording and use the slides and just get excited about helping readers and having conversations. Thank you, and have a great rest of your day.